Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, I'm Michelle Perkins, your host of Money and You, and we are here at ubngo.com to do another show. And I'm so excited about today's guest. I've loved all my guests this season. It's been so exciting to have such a diverse group of people on talking about money in many, many different ways, and all. I really would love it if you'd go back and listen to some previous shows, because there is so much great content and so much great information there, and so many different perspectives, which I just love. And today's guest is going to bring a very different perspective from anybody we've had before, and so excited about that too. So before we get started, I had an interesting weekend, and it's nothing I had planned to talk about, but I just feel compelled. There's so much time that I spend talking to people about managing money and thinking differently about money. And the reality is, and I talk about this all the time, that you have a relationship with money, and relationships are very emotionally driven. And so a lot of our money decisions are, in fact, driven by our emotions. And so being conscious and aware of that can help us to make better decisions. And one of the things that happened to a friend of mine was that she got involved in one of these romance scams. So if you don't know what that is, you can Google it, because they are everywhere and it's rampant. And women in particular, probably men too, but a lot of women, have been sort of the victims of these scams, and somebody falls in love with them, and then they build this whole relationship, and it's all online. Usually they've never met. I think probably 100% of the time they've never met, and then over time, they end up asking for things, and eventually they get to the point where they're asking for money, and an astounding number of people give them money. And it made me think, gosh, all the time that you're clipping coupons and watching your interest rates on your credit cards and saving and budgeting and all the things, and then to turn around and make this kind of wild emotional decision to give somebody you've never met money because they've really, hit that emotional place within you that causes you to do this. And so it was an interesting research project, because my girlfriend had gotten involved with somebody and started asking the questions of, do you think this guy is real, and all of this stuff. And so drove us to do a lot of research, and you can actually go on the Federal Trade Commission website and see all kinds of complaints and things, and it's very interesting. And these are professionals. They know exactly, how to tap into someone's deeper emotions to get them, to persuade them really to give them money. So a really weird thing for me to bring up, I think, but it just made me think, my gosh, with all the effort that we put into trying to earn money and save money and everything else, to just boom, give a enormous amount away sometimes for this unusual reason, just really made me think. And it also made me mad as I was looking at this. I'm like, oh my gosh, more women need to know that when they meet somebody online, where the red flags are, and to be a little more discerning about just dealing with this person. And so anyway, I know it's a strange thing to bring up, but I really felt compelled to just say something and try to just, hopefully somebody out there who needs to hear it is hearing it, that, if you've not met this person, you need to definitely do your research. And somebody asking you for money who you've never met is probably the biggest red flag. So just saying. With that, the other thing I realized is the people that they target are very heart-centered people. They're people who are compassionate and want to help people and want to do, some good things in the world. And so they use, obviously, that to get what they want. And so I'm going to weirdly tie this into my guest today, because my guest is a heart-centered entrepreneur and probably can relate to some of what I'm saying. And I just I'm going to introduce her, and we'll jump into a totally different topic. I'm not going to talk about scammers anymore, but I just wanted to for a moment. And we're going to talk much more about being a humanitarian entrepreneur. And so I'm going to bring on Tiffany Moore, who is a human rights activist, consultant, and coach. And after more than 10 years working full-time in the nonprofit world, she was tired of being restricted on when, how, and where to work. Venturing out on her own, she struggled with how to navigate being in business for herself, fiercely passionate about changing the world, but not knowing how to bridge the gap in the entrepreneurial space. Now she helps those working in nonprofits leverage their passion to change the world and become humanitarian entrepreneurs. So Tiffany, welcome.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank
and
you.
I'm sure that story definitely resonated with someone. If you felt compelled to say that, someone needed to hear it for sure.
Yes, I know you're probably sitting there going, okay, really? That's what she's talking about.
No, but I also love the segue. That was awesome.
Yeah, well, good, but it did. Yeah, it was a good part of my weekend looking into this, and you start reading the stories and what people have experienced, and it's to me it was shocking that this could happen as easily and often as it does. But so anyway. So Tiffany, tell us about you. Tell us about where you started and how you got to this point with the service that you provide.
Sure. So I always knew in my heart a general idea of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't able to articulate it. It wasn't something that could be pinpointed on one of those career aptitude tests. I knew it in my heart, but I just couldn't articulate it. So I started going along and just following my passion. And okay, I don't know where this is going to go, but this is what I'm going to do. And so I started with an undergrad in sociology. I fell into a position where I absolutely loved the work. And that was my gap year, shall we say, between undergrad and grad school. But it was only going to be temporary. It was just so that I could get through grad school, and I had this big vision for my life. So I get through grad school, and then I was completely burnt out. I had been working full time and going to school full time for so long that I was at a point where I really thought that I was going to have to go out in disability. I was that just drained and not able to make it through the day. So what started as, okay, I just need to be able to find a position where I can work from home. So I started different entrepreneurial type things, and it just never really landed. There was always that disconnect between what I knew in my heart all along from when I was little to, making a career out of it and being able to work when I needed to and when I couldn't work because of just feeling terrible. And then bridging that gap and just what I was super, super passionate about with human rights.
Yeah, that's fascinating and super interesting to me because I originally got a criminal justice degree and I had a few different avenues that I was interested in, and social work was definitely something that I was looking at. And I too was told I was pretty serious about it until so many people started telling me this, I know you want to help people, but this is kind of a burnout career. And I've always looked back and thought, because now I don't really love it when people give young people negative advice like that. It's their experience maybe and not necessarily somebody else's. And but I often look back and think, I never actually tried it, so I don't really know if that would have been true or if I would have, loved it. But anyway, yeah. So
no, but that's interesting that you brought that up, though. I'd like to piggyback off of that for a second, because that's actually the career that I went into that I was just going to be in through grad school. It was actually working in the criminal justice system. And I had done that for 10 years. My graduate degree was in global gender studies. And people are like, what are you going to do with that? You're in the criminal justice field. You should go and be a lawyer. So I was like, okay, fine. I will listen to you. I will take the LSATs. So I go and I take the LSATs. And for those of you that have taken it, it is a very, very, very long exam. And so I sat in the car after and I was like, what did I just do? I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't know why I just did that. But like, exactly. I was like, okay, well, now what am I going to do with my life? And it was when the economy was horrible. So people couldn't be hired in these positions.
Yeah.
So everyone was super overworked, super underpaid, and everyone was getting sick. We had exorbitant insurance rates because of all of the health issues that were coming from all the people in the agency because everyone was burnt out.
Mm,
Everyone was just exhausted and
yeah.
drained.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, it sounds like we had some of those some similar interests, and yeah, and I mean, you could definitely have a whole conversation about what other people have to say about the choices that you're making and how that
Right.
influences you. Because just like everybody was telling you to be a lawyer, people were telling me to be
Right.
things. I ended up becoming a CPA because similar thing. I was doing an
Yeah.
internship at the Attorney General's office, and I was working on a white collar crime investigative project, and they said, well, if you're interested in this, you should go learn accounting. And it's other people's advice will take you rapidly down some interesting roads. So,
Mm-hmm.
again, another reason to be aware out there. um, so yeah, so okay, so tell me what happened from there. Where?
So I was okay, well, what am I going to do with all these entrepreneurial things? This isn't working. I've tried it. Okay, fine, I'm done. So I'm just going to get a different job and that's going to fix everything, right?
Right.
So I start looking and I start looking and I'm not getting anything. And I'm like, what? I'm qualified. Like, I just don't understand. And of course, divine intervention, this is fate. So I applied for this one position and I'm like, I have so got this. I know I've got this. And they contacted me and said, we loved we thought you were great, but we're not offering you this position. However, and that, however, is what completely changed their trajectory.
Wow.
That offered me a consulting position. And I had thought, I had known about consulting. I write grants and I said, okay, I can do this, but again, for those of you that write grants, like that's draining in and of itself. And to do that all day, every single day, there was still
Mm.
that disconnect.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't know that I can consult for nonprofit organizations. I didn't realize that there was this whole other world that for one reason or another, people are looking for consultants. And that's really where this transition had led. And so as I'm, going about doing these consulting for different organizations, I'm having people tell me, oh, aren't you so lucky you can work and travel and do all these things and work whenever you want and not work when you don't want and all these things. And I'm like, well, it's not, just me being lucky or me being different. Anyone can do this. And that's why I really started to transition into coaching and explaining to those that are in this space that there is another way. I mean, if you are happy in the nonprofit space, that's fantastic. There are definitely the need for this. But for those that are looking for another way,
Mm-hmm.
I offer them another way. And
Yeah.
what wasn't taught to me, what wasn't explained to me.
Right. Well, you've brought up, again, a lot of things that we could talk about. For one thing, I want to back up to the entrepreneurial ventures that you tried.
Yes.
And, I think coming from the background you had and then trying
Mm-hmm.
to start businesses, that's a whole other discipline. And you probably find that out there where people are starting, even their consulting businesses, but don't really know that much about business and how to build one and how to create a profitable business. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
whole. Do you look back now and think that you needed to know more, have more business skills or business acumen? Was that part
Uh,
of it?
well, something that we were saying offline about mindset. I really believe that you can take all these business courses, and that's exactly what I did. I was like, oh, well, I'm coming from the nonprofit space. I'm coming from a research and academic background, and so I don't know any business skills. That's where I'm failing.
Mm.
And what I was taking all these business courses, and what I didn't realize was it's the mindset. And when I started to change my mindset and my beliefs about money and beliefs about worthiness and self-esteem, especially all these lessons that are indoctrinated into us through the nonprofit system, through schooling, through the actual work itself, when I dismantled those is when the shifts really started to happen.
Really interesting. Can you tell us some of the beliefs just examples? Because I do
Mhm.
know, from interacting and working with people who want to be in the nonprofit space and people who have been. My mom was one of the people who had been for many, many years. And there is a different mindset, especially around money. And, there's
Yes.
sort of this idea that if you're in service and you want to do good in the world, money has a somewhat negative connotation, even though nonprofits have to raise money to survive and do the great work that they want to do. So what
Mhm.
kind of money mindsets and other mindsets for that matter did you see out there?
I think there was a lot of really being told over and over and again as a nonprofit employee that, well, you're not in this field to make money. Like that's not it.
Yeah.
And you can't make money. The only way to make money is to get a government job with a pension or really move your way up through a nonprofit organization. Those are the only two ways. That's it. And I'm like, that just doesn't seem right. I remember working with this one coworker I had, and she was doing a different type of job. And we live in a very cold area. And so we have our heat on 9 months out of the year. And I remember she went and she applied for subsidized program to have help with her heating, which is very, very popular here. She missed it by $12. And like that just says something when you have to have an education to do a certain position, but you are like just above the poverty line. Like that
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't make sense. I mean, it's one thing if you're, saying, oh, I want these, 12 bedroom mansions or, these huge cars. That's one thing. But to be struggling to keep a roof over your head, to keep the heat
Mm-hmm.
on so that, you're not sick, to keep the heat on so that you're just, basic things, like that's totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's not what's talked about, and that's very unfortunate. So really dispelling the idea that money is evil, dispelling the idea that money is greedy, all these things. Money is just an energetic exchange. That's
Mm-hmm.
all it is. I mean, if you need heat, I'm going to pay for heat. Like that's not inherently a good thing or a bad thing. Like you just that's what you do.
Right.
And even the idea of selling, people just, oh, people hate selling. But again, if you have a product that I'm looking for, please tell me that you have it. I want to
Mm-hmm.
know if it's going to make my life better. Please tell me.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just this negative connotation that, there are these sleazy salespeople and that money is just the sleazy thing. But yes, people can make it sleazy, but in and of itself is not sleazy.
Right. Right. That was beautifully said. It's so true, and I think it is important in the nonprofit space to understand that better because the organizations suffer, the people suffer, and the good that they're capable of doing just doesn't get out there and spread to where it could. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
really unfortunate because there are so many organizations. I tend to work with very small nonprofit organizations. I don't know the energy. I love
Mm-hmm.
the smaller organizations, but there's a conversation that we regularly have about well, we can't afford to pay for this type of consultant or this type of staff member, and it's like you're getting yourself caught in this pattern and on this never-ending loop. If you're not paying for it, that next level, you're never going to get to that next level, and you're just going to stay stagnant or in the red, and that's a whole nother mess. And so it's just kind of shifting those perspectives, and some of those consultants really pay for themselves, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that people forget that or don't realize that.
Right, right. And I think that same advice is great for-profit entrepreneurs
Yes.
because they
Mm-hmm.
too need to hire people and they too need to, and sometimes like you said, it's a cycle and to get out of it, they have
Right.
to make that investment. Um, so are you primarily coaching the nonprofit directly, the directors and whoever is in charge of them, or are you coaching and teaching coaches to work with them?
So I am consulting those within the nonprofit space. So
Okay.
whether that's current staff members or whether it is the higher ups that are looking to have that entrepreneurial space, they want to have maybe like a side business,
Mm-hmm.
but really it's those that nonprofit staff who is really kind of on the poverty line that
Yeah.
are is trying to figure out a way of elevating their life and really growing in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, what are some of the steps that you might take them through, or some of the, what's the process? Because it sounds challenging for you, honestly.
Well, it's trying to get people to believe in themselves, and I think a
Okay.
lot of the times people aren't because there's that. Well, I if I made more money, I would be able to do all these other things, and that sometimes has that correlation of, unfortunately, of self worth,
Mm-hmm.
and really trying to shift that. But the first step, I really have a free PDF on my website on how to even get started with finding your passions. So that's one of the first things that we go through is looking at your passions and figuring out, okay, well, where do you really want to go? What do you really want to do? And then it's looking outside of the box, because so often people are thinking, well, it can only be this way or can only be that way. Like how I was told, well, it's only working up through an organization or it's getting a government position with a pension. And that's not true. So it's thinking outside the box. It's then having those conversations with leveraging the uniqueness of the person, because there are some people who thrive on a stage. There are some
Mm-hmm.
people who would rather podcast. There are other people who have other ways of sharing their gifts and talents. And one's not necessarily better than another. And you don't want to put someone in a situation where it's not going to be beneficial for them. It's also really getting to the heart of those subconscious beliefs that, of mindset with money and mindset with self-worth and fear of judgment and all these things that are not talked about, unfortunately, in school. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that would elevate the staff themselves so much more. But especially with an entrepreneurial venture, you have to have these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agree with you. And when I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about the people running these nonprofits, and I'm trying to envision how they would see the possibility for the future of the organization if they're sort of stuck in that kind of thinking. Because what are they believing is going to happen? Are they waiting for a big investment of some kind to come in? I mean, where does the expansion happen for them? Or are
I
they
think
okay with just sort of wherever they're at?
it depends. I remember having a conversation with, she was a foundation. She was the president of a foundation, and she was talking about, it was at a round table, and she was talking about how there are a lot of overseas organizations that are coming in and trying to, as she saw it, stealing the staff for
Mm-hmm.
those that were looking for remote work.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't compete. This world can't compete with these higher salaries, this working from home. And I had to say, well, no, but you're thinking that there's a world of competition, and that's what's constantly perpetuated of this this competition, and that's not actually true. Some people don't want to do this entrepreneurial stuff. It's hard. It's
Mm-hmm.
if everybody wanted to do this, they would be. There are a lot of pitfalls. There's, I mean, security is an illusion, but like there's risk.
Right.
There's a lot of things that you don't have with a regular salaried position. And I mean, I come from a whole lot of people in my family who refuse to be entrepreneurs.
Mm.
I had tried to get them for years and years and years and years, and they're like, "No, Tip, you don't understand. It's so hard." Da, 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 da. But that's the mindset. And so I tried explaining to her that there's not this competition. And so I think that that is part of it, is that there's like this fear of competition and going under, because I think they've
Mm-hmm.
seen other nonprofits that if they make the wrong moves, then they can get absorbed by another company. So I think that there is that fear. There's so much of that fear. And that's a lot of what I work with clients, is to overcome this idea of fear, and this fear all around, of fear of security and taking risks, and fear of money. I mean, there is a fear of money people have, fear of judgment, all of these things that I try to disillusion them on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. I think when we talk about mindset and shifting mindset, a lot of that is about getting underneath the fears and trying to help them, see things differently. And there is you're right, there's a tremendous amount of fear out there, particularly around money and around career choice. I'm finding this really interesting because I do work with a lot of people who would love to work for a nonprofit. That's really, they feel their calling. Whatever it is that they do, a nonprofit environment seems to make the most sense. But then there is this, they talk themselves out of it because they believe that no nonprofit is going to pay, them enough to live on. So what would you tell someone who's interested in a career in a nonprofit environment?
Well, that's where consulting comes in.
Yeah.
And if you want to be having a certain rate, you can set your rate. And that's what's fantastic is, people pay for your expertise. And that's what I wasn't understanding, that there were only certain kind of consultants. That's why I had never thought of this until that one position had said, well, we have this opening. Are you interested in this? And that's when everything shifted. I didn't realize, and I don't think, and I know most people don't realize that there are all these different types of consultants that people are willing to pay for and want your expertise and will pay for your expertise. It's not all organizations, because there is still that mindset of fear and disillusionment and all of these things. But, there are those organizations that want what you have, that really want to up level.
Right, right. And so can you give us a case study or two that, where you've worked with someone as a consultant and kind of what you've worked with them on, just so people
Sure.
can
So a lot of it's really been about changing that mindset and really trying to get someone to believe in themselves, and having someone believe in themselves and realize, okay, I'm actually worth this, is absolutely huge. People also don't realize how much they haven't been valuing themselves, because a lot of the times when you're attracted to this type of work, you have trauma in your background, and you have all of those issues that you need to overcome. To see someone realize what's underneath, it's not just about your career, it's about your whole life. It completely shifts your whole life and your whole being, and you just up level as a person, which just permeates throughout not only those in your immediate life, but through generations. It's you're modeling good behavior for the next generation and the next generation.
Right. And when you talk to people about their value, are you helping them to see their strengths and their skills, and as well as their mindset, maybe limitations? Yes. But is it more than that, or is it more?
Yes. So that's what the free PDF on my website is. Okay. It really goes through your strengths. It goes through your weaknesses. It goes through things that light you up. It goes through things that, okay, what do you love about your position? What do you not like about your position? Because if you don't like to cold call, then certain positions aren't going to be good for you. There are certain things that you need to really be mindful of for the next step. So that's the first step, is actually going through the strengths and the weaknesses and your passions, and again, what lights you up. That's the first step on the journey.
Yeah, and I feel it's the same really for everyone as they're transitioning careers, or just trying to improve, their professional situation, as well as for entrepreneurs. I mean, that awareness is really such a building block. And so for people to skip over that, and I could see in the nonprofit world where people would be so focused on the service that they're providing or the help that the people that they serve need, that they wouldn't necessarily take that time to look at themselves that closely. I don't know. You can confirm or deny that.
No, I think you're absolutely right, because you're so much in reactive mode, because when you are burning the candle at both ends, you don't have that time to be, or you don't have the energy to be like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, well, this is what I need to do. Okay, well, I'm on 3 hours of sleep. I can do that tomorrow. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is that when you don't do that and you keep putting it off and you keep putting it off, it just gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it just gets compounded. And then before you know it, 10 years have gone by and you're just absolutely miserable and more in this trench of, I don't know how to get out, where you're treading water and just like, somebody help me. But this is that frustration, that internal frustration, that you need to be able to take that time and go through that mindset stuff that isn't a quick fix.
Yeah.
It's not a quick pill, and it's that thing that people don't want to do, but you have to be able to do the inner work.
Yes, I so agree with you. And as you're
Mm-hmm.
talking, because what you're referring to people who are working so hard and so many hours that they really can't
Yeah.
stop and reflect. And that is across the board for busy moms who
Mm-hmm.
either work or even don't work. I mean, it's everybody's got their own situation that can create really a vacuum where they don't have time for themselves. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking one thing that I always recommend business owners do is to kind of take some CEO time where it's just your thinking time. It's where you're not doing anything really but sitting there and just trying to allow yourself to think outside the box or allow creative ideas to come and just to take that regular time. And I'm always, when people are laid off from jobs, for example, they're upset, but I always feel like, wow, this is your window. This is like your
A
opportunity to stop
blessing.
and reflect because you never had time to do that before. And
Right.
so, but I think it's really important to make that time however you need to make it. Schedule yourself as if you're a client or a customer or, so that you can stop and where you said, 10 years can go by. I've experienced that too. 10 years can go by and you haven't had any time to think about it. And so I think your career development, your professional development of yourself should be factored into your schedule somewhere and done on a regular basis. Not when it's an emergency, when you're so burnt out that you can't even, get out of bed, or when you get laid off from a job or whatever. So,
Even if you start
any
with
any
five
practical
minutes,
ideas for people? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
yeah, even if you start with just 5 minutes, I mean, 5 minutes a day. I mean, even if you have to split it up into 2.5 minutes in the morning and 2.5 minutes in the evening, but as long as you are starting to take those baby steps, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. And as long as you are taking that time, you're able to listen to yourself. And one of the big things that I constantly see is people have a fear of trusting themselves
Mm-hmm.
because they're listening, as we started the
Yeah.
conversation, they're listening too much to the people outside. And that's when, because they keep thinking, okay, well, I need to make this person happy. I need to make this person happy. Well, when are you going to make yourself happy?
Mm-hmm.
You are the person who needs to look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day. You need to make yourself happy, and trying to fill it with all these other things is not going to work. Trust me, you can try, and then 10 years is going to go by and you're going to be in the same spot. Actually, you're going to be worse off
Yeah.
than you were 10 years ago.
Yes, and you bring up another great point, which is I think for young people, when you start your career, you're just working really hard. You're trying to figure things out, and it's all very confusing. And there's still a mindset that the harder you work, either the more money you make or just the more recognition you get or whatever. It's all about, and I'm all for a good work ethic.
Right.
I've probably drilled that into my kids, and I have it myself. But that doesn't mean that you never take this time that you're talking about. That's a different thing. But I think
Right.
for a lot of young people, I find that what happens is the older people they hit some wall at some point, and older could be 30. I mean, it doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
be 60, but I love the idea of sort of preventative work to keep yourself at least aware. Have a level of awareness that happens on a regular basis, like what you're talking about, versus once you hit that wall,
Right.
and yeah. So,
And because you hit it hard,
yeah.
you hit it hard.
Yeah. And then it's
and you don't see
devastating.
it coming.
No, no. And then it's a whole, kind of rethink about your life. And that's hard too. I mean, hopefully it's
Mm-hmm.
really great on the other side, but that other side can take a few years to get to too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the whole career progression is super interesting to me, and the way we go about it, I don't think is that great. I don't think we're that educated on how to go about it, and so people get this information later, after it's difficult. So, yeah.
Well, it's
So,
that old mindset of, okay, you get one position, you stay in there for 40 years, you get that pension, but times have changed now. And that's the one thing that I keep telling to clients too is, what we were told, when we were kids, there are so many different careers now than there were back then. I mean, this wasn't an option to talk to somebody on another part of the world 10 years ago. Like that wasn't, I mean, okay, maybe 10 years ago, 20 years ago, that wasn't an option.
right.
And so all these different things, and that's why you need to think outside of the box as well. But yeah, that what we've been told is just, it's outdated.
Yeah, very much so. And I think the research shows that people now will change careers 12 to 15 times in their life, which even that's sounding like less than I think is real, but that's a huge departure. Like you say, people would choose. It was the big deal that you had to choose something because you were going to stay in it so long. Now I feel like people can experiment a lot more too. They can try something and they can leave after a year or two if they're finding it's not the thing. What do you see though in the nonprofit world? Is that the same?
In terms of the 12 to 15 people
Well,
constantly.
yeah. Do people feel, do they get just tied to an organization, maybe for emotional reasons, like we were saying, and then even if they're unhappy, not leave, or are they kind of moving from one to the other? I mean, in the for-profit world, sometimes people do that just for promotions and raises, and
Right.
also just to get more experience. But do you see that progression? Like, is that a way to do a career in the nonprofit space?
I've seen that because that's what's being told is, well, you need to work your way up and that's how you get the money. And there's that thought of, well, if you just stick it out. I remember when I left to do entrepreneurship full time, I had someone at the organization saying, well, if you just stick it out for a couple more years, that bonus is huge. And I'm like, that's like really, that's what you have me staying for? Just a couple more years. Like
Yeah.
that's just, but that's the mindset of, well, I just, if I just get that next promotion, I'm going to be happy. If I just get that next promotion, I'll be making the money or, whatever the thought is, which often is tied to happiness.
Yeah.
But that's not the case, and that
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate. So
Yeah.
yes, I
Yeah.
am seeing it.
That's a
Mm-hmm.
great example. Um, yeah, that's another whole conversation about whether, that next thing is tied to happiness. And that's really, I
Right.
think, where the old paradigm, where people would stay in something 40 years to get their retirement, because all the happiness was supposed to come, when you're traveling after you've stopped working. So, or doing
Right.
whatever you want to do. But so I think, again, it's a mindset even around happiness and
Mm-hmm.
the idea that you can be happy doing the work and in the work environment that you're in and with the people you're working with. That's, I think, a new paradigm that I think the younger generations kind of get that a little bit more. That's more what they're looking for. And do you see a lot of younger people choosing nonprofits for careers?
I am. I think, but there's just that mindset. And this is what my family's done. This is what I do. This is where my passion is. So, I mean, obviously, this is what to do because I'm not seeing another option. Um, and that's really where I try to show them that there are other options. I mean, if that's what you want to do, you want to spend, years and years in a nonprofit, that's fantastic. That people need that, nonprofits need that,
Mm-hmm.
but there is another option. You don't have to just think that this is the only way.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because sometimes I do get the question if I really want to be, working in a nonprofit or start my own nonprofit, should I work, in the for profit world first and then go there? Or if I work in the nonprofit space first, will I be able to get a job in a corporation, for example? And you're more in touch with this world than I am, so I'd love the answer to that question.
I like the latter. I mean, obviously, you're building up your expertise, but follow your passion. And if you're called to work for a for-profit organization at this time, fantastic, do it. If you're being called to work for a nonprofit organization this time, fantastic, do it. If you're being called to find another way, do it. You are the one that you need to answer to at the end of the day. So whatever that is, you need to be at peace with that and just trust that the next steps are going to unfold when the next steps are supposed to unfold. And that could be next year, that could be 10 years from now, but just trust that what you're doing is the right thing. And it is.
I love that. So don't worry about those rules about, because
Right.
there are a lot of industries and professions that have rules like that. If you want to
Mm.
go into academics, do you work in a corporate environment first and then go, or could you flip that? And people think there are these formulas, and I, I typically don't, but
Right.
I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, yeah, what you're saying is exactly that. I mean, live a limit free life on your own terms and by your own rules and just follow what is right for you. And those options will be open to you. And
Absolutely.
I love that. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. And can you tell us some of the things you have going on and some ways people can connect with you?
Sure, absolutely. So I will be launching a telesummit within the next several weeks. I'd say like end of November. The information hasn't been released yet, but if you are interested in getting the recordings of all the fantastic consultants who are doing this wonderful work,
Mm.
please sign up for my email list. And you can do that through getting that free PDF that I spoke about on finding your passion and your strengths and all of that work on my website, humanitarian-entrepreneur.com.
Great, thank you. So that's humanitarian. Oh, I think it's up there,
It is,
humanitarian
yes.
entrepreneur.com. Great. And who is that telesummit for? Who would be, who should listen to it?
So these are for those who want to try entrepreneurship, that are coming from the nonprofit space that are looking for that other way. So these are consultants and these are freelance um, activists and those that have found their way on how to do this. And they talk about their journey through consulting and entrepreneurship.
Interesting. So if people are listening and you do have kind of a leaning toward activism, um,
Yes.
a good option for you to watch this telesummit. That sounds great. I'd love to listen to it myself. Um, yeah. Well, thank you so much. And any other ways people can connect with you?
I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn with Humanitarian Entrepreneur.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, I love the journey that you've taken, and what just in general, because I think your feelings actually are so much part of the information you should be taking in, as you go through your career. What are some of the feelings that you have now about the work that you're doing compared to earlier?
Empowerment. I
Mm.
think that's something that was missing in the nonprofit work that I thought that I was going to find. I thought that I was going to be able to really help change the world. And I thought that I was going to feel that empowerment there, but it was very constricting. And I'm finally feeling that empowerment and that I'm doing the good in the world that I had wanted to do all along.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well, congratulations, because
Thank you.
I'm sure these decisions were not easy for you, just like they really aren't for anybody. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is making these decisions. They feel like, really sometimes insurmountable kinds of decisions to make. And so they take a long time or they're too difficult and sometimes we don't make them at all. And so you clearly have worked through that and can help others do that as well. So
Yes.
yeah,
Thank you for
wonderful.
having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. Wonderful work that you're doing. I'd love
Thank
before
you.
you leave, because I usually end the show with a tough love money tip. So, and they vary. They've been all over the place. But I'd love to hear, because you do work so much with mindset and
Mhm.
people. Um, do you have a tough love money tip for people?
I think the biggest thing about when you're trying to create wealth, and wealth can be, again, just being able to keep the lights on, be able to keep the heat on, a roof over your head, really just, you know, that abundance. When you're putting out, you're in service to people, and when you're putting out that positive energy, the money is going to flow in, and you have to trust that. So that's why your passion for changing the world and helping others is a good thing. And you can create money from that because you are putting this fantastic value into the world. The world needs you. The world needs this.
Mm.
And the money will be there. I promise.
I love that. That's a great affirmation, actually. It's a great belief to walk around with, that, believing that the value you're putting out there and bringing to the world will come back to you in terms of abundance and wealth, however you define that. And I
Yes.
love that you said that, because that is a term that it can be entirely determined by you. So
Right.
whatever wealth is. Yeah, I love that. Well, Tiffany, again, thank you. I really appreciate you being
Thank you.
here. It was lovely to meet you.
Lovely to
So,
meet you. Thank you so much for having me.
yeah, thank you. And listeners, thank you. Thank you for being here. Love bringing the Money and You show to you. It will stream 7 o'clock on Monday nights on ubngo.com, and then show up on all the podcast platforms you might listen to, as well as the Limit Free Life YouTube channel and Facebook page. So thank you so much for being here. Love for you to subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube show, and leave reviews and ask me questions. If there's a topic you'd like to hear about or a question you have, please email me at Michelle, 2Ls, at limitfreelife.com. And you can go to my site as well, limitfreelife.com, and get some wonderful free gifts, a career change kit, a money boundaries assessment checklist that will help you see where your money mindset might be limited or challenged, and also a productivity guide for entrepreneurs. So those are all at limitfreelife.com, and please connect with me there and become part of my community, and you'll continue to get lots of free content. So thank you so much for being here again. See you next Monday.